Wondery.
From Wondery, I'm Lindsey Graham, and this is American Scandal. Over the past 6 episodes, we followed the story of an elderly Swami from India who captured the zeitgeist of America's 1960s counterculture with his message of peace and love. It's also the story of his Western disciples who took to the faith, but also had a hunger for power. Devotees like Keith Ham or Kirtanananda, who decided to build a commune of his own in West Virginia, and how it all started to unravel into petty crime, then felonies, and the eventual murders of Steve Bryant and Chuck St. Dennis. Joining us on today's show is Henry Doktorski. He was a Hare Krishna devotee and lived at New Vrindavan from 1978 to 1994. His book, Killing for Krishna, The Danger of Deranged Devotion, covers the history of the Hare Krishnas in the United States and the murders within their ranks. Henry was a consultant on our series, and we've invited him on the show to talk more about what led him to join the Hare Krishnas, what day-to-day life on the commune was like, why he finally left, and why he thinks this story must be told.
Wondery's shocking true crime podcast, Over My Dead Body, is back for a 3rd season with a story about corruption, betrayal, and the secrets of a fallen hero. Follow Over My Dead Body, Season 3, Fox Lake, on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening right now.
A quick note before we carry on with this episode. If you're tired of interruptions like these, you can now listen to our back catalog and new episodes of American Scandal completely ad-free on Stitcher Premium. You can sign up now for a free month of Stitcher Premium by going to stitcherpremium.com/Wondery and using the promo code Wondery. Henry Doktorski, thanks for joining us on today's show.
Pleasure's mine, Lindsay.
So you were a Hare Krishna and a resident of New Vrindavan for 15 years.
Right. Actually, 15, 16 years.
15, 16 years. Okay. Let's discuss the circumstances that around your joining the movement. As I understand it, it was just right after your graduation from college, and you were in Parkville, Missouri. How did you find the Krishnas and then move to West Virginia?
Well, it's I suppose you might say it's a long story, but I'll try to speak as briefly as I can. In college, my sophomore year, somehow I saw an advertisement for the Transcendental Meditation people. That's Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. And I thought, and it was about meditation. And I said, oh, this is pretty cool. You know, I had an affinity toward that. And I joined and paid my $35 fee. And I would do their mantra like for 20 minutes silently twice a day. And I enjoyed that. And then maybe a year later, my junior year, I heard that Baba Ram Das, he was formerly known as Richard Alpert at Harvard, who experimented with LSD and then met this guru in India and became Baba Ram Das and began preaching that Hindu philosophy. He was going to give a lecture at the University of Kansas in Lawrence, which is not terribly far from Parkville, where I was attending college. So I went to hear him, and I bought his book, Be Here Now, and that was the first time I heard about reincarnation. And I said, well, that's, pretty interesting. I think it seems to make a lot more sense than the Catholicism that I grew up in, basically saying, that, good, if you obey the laws of God, you go to heaven. If you disobey them, you go to hell or purgatory or this or that for the rest of eternity. And I thought reincarnation was pretty cool because you always get a second chance. It's not like you're damned for eternity. And I also found out that these yogis were vegetarian. And I said, well, that makes sense to me too. So I started actually looking for, I was interested in that. I was looking for a spiritual commune where I could learn more about these spiritual topics. And after I graduated with a degree in piano performance, I began driving back home to New Jersey. I began driving home to New Jersey, where I grew up. And on the way, I stopped in Iowa, where Maharishi had this university, and I wanted to check it out. And I visited, and it wasn't for me because it was just too clean cut and like conservative. It looked. The students there, the male students, they wore shirts and ties. And they had clean, they had nice short haircuts, and I was never a hippie, but I liked that idea, and I had long hair, and I wasn't a pothead or anything, but I certainly wasn't conservative. So I kept driving back to New Jersey, and I was disappointed in the Maharishi University. I had a high school buddy who had a summer job that year in Wheeling, West Virginia, and we were sitting in his hot and stuffy apartment with nothing to do, and he suggested, why don't we go visit the New Vrindavan Hare Krishna community? It's only like 10 miles from here, and they're building a palace to their founder. It's pretty cool. And so I did. We went to visit, and we were there several hours, had some very interesting philosophical discussions with some of the residents, and I was impressed. I thought, here's a community of people who practice what they preach. It was pretty radical. I mean, the men shaved their heads, and the single men were celibate, no sex of any kind, and they were vegetarians. And the single men in the ashram, there was about 30 guys, and they just slept on the floor in their sleeping bags. And at 3:00, they all woke up and went to the temple and chanted and attended the services. And I said, these people are like the Green Berets of all the spiritual movements. They're like tough, like the Marines. And I liked that because I guess in certain ways I am tough also. But anyway, it resonated with me. And then went back to New Jersey for the summer. And I was on my way to graduate school, driving to North Texas State, where I was going to study piano. And I planned the trip so that I would spend a couple days at New Vrindavan in West Virginia. And just to finish up on this story, as I was driving down Interstate 70 in the Wheeling exits coming up, and right before the exit ramp, this voice spoke to me in my head. And the voice said, if you turn off this highway, you are never going to get back on again. And it was kind of ominous. And I hesitated to turn off because I love music. I loved it then. I love it now. I'm good enough at it that I've made my living my whole life as a professional musician and teacher. And I hesitated to turn off. And then at the last second, I remembered how delicious their vegetarian food was, and I was pretty hungry. So I spun the steering wheel and slammed the brakes on, and I took the exit. And that's that. And then I arrived at New Vrindavan around 9 p.m. The sun had already set. It was twilight. Anyway, so I never got back on the road. And I did get back on the road, but it was 16 years later.
It's amazing how small the drivers are of our biggest decisions in life. You were just hungry.
Agreed.
One thing you said that probably sets up the tone of your entire journey with the Krishnas is that you were attracted to them not just for the vegetarian cuisine, but that they practiced what they preached, that they were the Green Berets of spiritualism. And I think probably, we'll get to this later, that it is your discovery that was not true at the upper echelons that makes this story so disappointing and horrendous. But before we get to that, I want to talk about the type of person who landed at New Vrindavan. You mentioned you were a Catholic growing up, but were you particularly religious in your Catholicism? Did you believe?
Not at all.
Not at all. But then you were definitely seeking something. And it occurs to me that most people at New Vrindavan, certainly when you arrived in 1977 or 78, they aren't born into the Krishna religion. It's something that they sought. And so I wonder if you could just tell me a little bit about the character of seekers.
Well, boy, my first response is that it may be very difficult to find a common character because the seekers come from so many different types of lifestyles and occupations and socioeconomic backgrounds. I grew up in a middle-class family. My parents were, kind of devout. At least we went to mass every day. But at New Vrindavan, we found one of my friends was his parents were atheists. And as far as background goes, we had truck drivers that joined there. We had homeless people that would join, and also college professors. Also, the director of public relations at New Vrindavan during this time in the mid '80s was an economics professor at West Virginia University in Parkersburg, and he came and he shaved his head and gave up his life as a college professor and came to join this commune to chant Hare Krishna and follow the principles of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, which is the actual name of the religion that Swami Prabhupada brought from India back in 1965, 1966. Having said that, Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita tells Arjuna that virtuous persons of four kinds worship me: those in distress, the seeker of knowledge, the seeker of wealth, and the man of wisdom. So we had all different types of people coming there for different reasons. I mean, I think I might have mentioned earlier that some were homeless people that came to the Krishnas because they could get food every day and a place to put their, sleep at night. And all they had to do was chant Hare Krishna and do some service. And then we had very scholarly people who'd come. Maybe they were searching for the absolute truth. Now, I know I'm talking too much, but if you're looking for a common denominator for people who joined the Hare Krishna, or for that matter, from what I've heard, any charismatic cult, I think you're going to find that they are unhappy with their lives at the present. All right. Nobody who is happy with the way their life is going to go join a commune like that. Speaking for myself. All right. My last couple of years in college, I had some reversals in my life, some negative relationships with women. I did not get into the graduate schools that I wanted to get into, and therefore that was like a big blow to my self-esteem. And I began to realize that I wasn't such a great musician that I thought I might become. So my life was very unsure. In fact, I was driving to North Texas State. I had been accepted there, but I had no financial aid, and I had no idea how I was going to pay for my tuition. So there was a lot of uncertainty in my life and a lot of lack of self-confidence, and I was unsure what the best course of action would be, and I was pretty unhappy. I was pretty unhappy overall, although it wasn't like an overriding. I wasn't depressed, but I knew that there was a thorn in my foot that was pricking me and bothering me. And so when I met the Hare Krishna devotees, I thought, well, let me try this. They promise eternal bliss, Krishna consciousness, a love of God that transcends any material pleasure, and the material miseries disappear for the self-realized soul who has achieved perfection. And I thought maybe I should try this, so I did.
Did you imagine yourself staying 15 years, the rest of your life, or was this just something to do in the interim while you figured things out?
The second time I visited New Vrindavan, which was in August of 78, I was on my way to graduate school. I only intended to spend a couple days, check out the scene, become more familiar with what they do, because I was interested in following this practice. However, soon after I arrived, I met Kirtanananda Swami, and he's in this podcast. He's called Keith Ham by his legal name, but we all called him Maharaj. And he had such a charisma, and I was affected by that. I saw him as a loving, wise father figure. And years later, I came to realize that my relationship with my own father when I was growing up did not satisfy the emotional needs that I had for a wise, loving father. Now, my father was terrific, but we were very different. His son and he were very, very different persons. He was more mechanically inclined. He loved to garden, and I hated gardening, and I wasn't mechanically inclined, but I liked intellectual things like reading and music and things like that. So I think I might have been on a subtle platform, maybe a little disappointment for him. He didn't, wasn't the kind of son he wanted. And consequently, I felt some void, let's put it, emotional void. And then when I met Swami Bhaktipad at the age of 22, here was this wise, artistic, music-loving man who became a substitute father for me. And he convinced me that I should set aside my graduate studies and devote my life to Krishna. And the benefits and the rewards would be out of this world. So at first I decided, okay, well, I can go stay here for a semester at least. I'll stay for 3 months. If I like it, fine. If I don't, I can just finish going back to school. But I had a conversion experience during that time and wound up staying there for 15, 16 years.
Well, let's talk about the charismatic leader of New Vrindavan, Keith Ham, or Kirtanananda Swami. In appearance, it sounds like he was a very good leader, a very good spiritual guide. People looked up to him, admired him, revered him, worshipped him. Give me a bit of a description of how he first won you over, and then we'll go into how perhaps that facade cracked.
Well, I had it was my first morning there. I spent the night in the ashram, and I went to the temple with the other devotees, and somebody gave me some beads, and someone gave me a dhoti and kurta, which is the traditional Bengali Vaishnav dress. And I went there and I chanted. I attended the morning service. I listened to the Srimad Bhagavatam class. And afterwards, I was sitting outside the temple on a bench, just chanting the japa on the beads. It's an individual type of chant. And Kirtanananda Swami comes over. He must have noticed me, and he came over and he just started a conversation and asked me, about myself. And I told him I was a musician. I was interested in studying piano and composing. And then he went on to say that in the future, he was planning on having a symphony orchestra based at New Vrindavan, and even producing great operas based on the Vedic figures, such as Lord Ramachandra, Krishna, of course. And I mean, the histories in the Vedas are quite extensive, and there's great stories there about battle and adventure and love. And at the time, that was kind of exciting to me. Looking into the future, of course, I could see that the community was just a pioneer village. I mean, it would be a decade or more than more than a decade before they got to the point where they could even have symphony concerts there, because it was a very rural, backwards place. So I told Maharaj, I said, yeah, it's a great idea. I'd love to be part of that. But for now, I'm going to continue undergraduate school and, study and become a better musician and composer. And then when you're ready to produce your operas, and, I'll come over here. But he discouraged me from even thinking about that. He said, your spiritual life is here. Krishna sent you here. You should, just give up everything and just dedicate your life to Krishna. And I argued with him. We were sitting in his truck, and he was driving me around the community and, but we had an argument there. A very pleasant argument, but neither of us was going to budge on our viewpoint. And then at that time, Prabhupada's Palace of Gold was under construction. It hadn't been completed, but it was still kind of impressive. And there was this dirt road he took me on in through the woods, beautiful forests and hills and a gorgeous country. And we're driving on this dirt road, and we're arguing. And then suddenly the palace appears in front of us, up high on the ridge, and it's quite striking. And he stops the vehicle, and he turns to me and he said, "What is the use of being the greatest musician on the earth if you lose your immortal soul?" And by saying that, I felt I had been defeated by his logic. And so I decided, okay, I'll stay for 3 months for a semester, and it's not going to hurt me to put off school for 3 months. But as I said earlier, I wound up staying for 15, 16 years.
Well, then let's discuss how this moment of surrender to Kirtanananda Swami and the movement changed. You became a devotee and integrated yourself into the life of the commune, helping build the temple itself. But I think this story, the core of it, really is one of something more sinister. Where did your suspicions begin?
Well, I was what some people called a bliss boy. There's all sorts of type of people at New Vrindavan, but a bliss boy is, a celibate brahmachari, a student. Brahmachari means celibate student. And all I like to do is hang out with my brahmachari buddies when I was, listen to darshans and classes from the spiritual master, eat Krishna prasadam, which is the vegetarian food, and dance during the temple services and chant Hare Krishna. And we're taught like that, to refrain from mundane talks, it is said. And I enjoyed it. I really liked being a bliss boy. But around 1983, I'd been there, 5 years or so. I heard some rumors that the spiritual master had been having some homosexual relations with some of the illegal Mexican workers that New Vrindavan had hired as undocumented immigrants to do construction and work in the gardens and things. But I dismissed these just as rumors. I didn't see any proof about it, and the temple leaders, of course, all denied any rumors like that. And I was happy doing what I was doing. I really enjoyed helping build the community, and I had quite a sweet, loving relationship with Kirtanananda Swami, and that was a source of great pleasure to me, like a father figure, a relationship between father and son. And however, it was a few years later. I think it might have even been around 1990. I had just, as time passed, I began to see inconsistencies in what they practiced and what they preached. And I, began to have some doubts. But I loved what I was doing there. At that time, I was a minister of music. I was the organist, the composer in residence. I directed the temple orchestra. I taught music, and really loved what I was doing. At that time, I had a wife and 2 children. My second child was born in 1992, and I had a pretty nice situation there. However, it seemed to me that my spiritual master was becoming more and more erratic. He would say things that were like just off the wall. And most of my god brothers and god sisters would say, Jai Bhakti Pad, whatever damn old thing he said. And it just didn't, it was just like inconsistent with me. It was like maybe my brain was not quite as brainwashed as theirs at this time. I began to really question whether this guy is really what he seems to be. And then finally in 1993, in September, at his birthday party, one of my godbrothers, who I knew very well and we were friendly with, happened to be returned to New Vrindavan. He was Bhattipad's driver, and he had come back from the World Parliament of Religion's centennial celebration in Chicago. And that night, as he was driving, the privacy curtain of the Winnebago accidentally opened, and when passing trucks' headlights shined into the Winnebago, he could look in the rearview mirror and see that his spiritual master was in bed with a teenage Malaysian male disciple. And they were performing some amorous activities, which are not becoming for a relationship of spiritual master and disciple, which is not sensually based at all. It's based on the spirit. So my friend came back and he started telling people about what he saw. And I believed him. I had heard rumors for years, but I discounted them as rumors, but I believed my friend. So basically after that, I did some research myself and I talked to some of the boys who were students at New Vrindavan. And there were children born into the community from parents who had converted to the Hare Krishna faith. And I talked to some of them and they said, this was sometime later. They weren't living at the community anymore, but I tracked them down and talked to them. And they said, yeah, Bhaktipad used to give us fellatio, at night in the ashram like that. And I believed them. So finally, October 93, I went to see my spiritual master. He was at that time living in a cabin about 20 some miles south of the community at an abandoned stone quarry. And I talked to him and I, respectfully told him, I said, is it true that you've been all these years been having illicit sex with the boys and the young men? And he denied it. But as he's always denied it. But at this time, I did not believe him. I knew he was lying because I'd done my research. And that's when I rejected him and I stopped serving at the community. And soon after, I left.
So you left in the early 90s, but it was 10 years prior that Charles St. Denis and Steve Bryant were killed. Did you hear any rumors of their deaths and the person who was responsible, Thomas Drescher or Tirtha?
Well, let's say that I knew who Tirtha, Thomas Drescher, who he was, although we did not have a relationship. He was the bus driver around 1982. New Vrindavan's a large community, maybe even 4,000 acres, and people had to get from one place to another. So we had a shuttle bus, and he was the driver. I remember seeing him as the bus driver, even helping some of the women with their baskets of laundry when they're bringing, back home and stuff like that. So I thought he was rather kind-hearted. Now, I must point out that I was a strict brahmachari, that celibate student, and I followed all these principles: no meat eating, no illicit sex, no intoxication, no gambling. However, there was a fairly large segment of the community which did not follow these rules, and they were known as fringies. Now, they did not live in the temple or at Bhattipad's house like I did, or nearby. They lived on the fringes of the community in cabins or something out in the woods. And I was taught early on not to hang out with these people because as a novice, as I was when I first joined, your association is very important. You kind of like become who you hang out with. So I only hung out with those devotees who were serious. And so I didn't know Drescher because I knew he was a fringy. And I didn't know Chuck St. Denis, Chakradari, because he was a fringy also. And I didn't know Steve Bryant, Solochan, because he also drank beer and took cocaine and may have gone to parties like that. I did not know these people. I had seen them around, but I did not know them because I purposely isolated myself from people who might be bad influence on me. So when St. Denis was murdered, I was out on the road. For 7 years, I lived in a van with one or two other brahmachari buddies, and we'd out be fundraising. Every day we'd go find a supermarket parking lot or a shopping mall, and weekends we'd go to football games and NASCAR races and sporting events, and we'd hawk these bumper stickers with and get donations for charities. And I was really good at it. So I was out there for 7 years, and we'd come back to the community only once a month for 3 days for a festival, and then we'd be back out again. So I really don't remember hearing about Chuck St. Denis's murder. And that may be because the people I hung out with, like Bhaktipad, for instance, my spiritual master, when I was back on the road, I'd sleep in his basement with all the other brahmacharis, and we would hang out with them like a son would hang out with their father or something, And he would, if I heard anything, it was that Chuck St. Denis had just left and went on, disappeared somewhere. And I believed what I heard. And then when Steve Bryant was murdered in Los Angeles in 86, I was out on the road again. See, there was a big buzz about it that the morning that it happened at the community, at the temple. And I've since then talked to people who said that even a cheer went out, but I was away, and I didn't hang out with this. So in a sense, I was protected from all of this because, see, I was a dedicated Bhaktipad follower at that time. And if I had been called to assist in this murder, I think I probably would have gone along with it, and assisted because of my devotion to my spiritual master and my desire to protect him. But I was protected from that. I wasn't involved. And that's why I could write this book, Killing for Krishna Today, because it's all news to me. You know what I'm saying? I wasn't implicated in it.
That book that you wrote, The Danger of Deranged Devotion, it's large. It's 600 pages about the scandal surrounding the Hare Krishnas in New Vrindavan. What is important about this scandal for people to learn?
Well, yes, it is a large book, but the story is so complex and detailed that I really felt compelled not to omit any of the details. The book was not written for the general public. It was written for Krishna devotees in their language, because I just felt this was a part of history that I did not know of until recently. And I think most people did not know the extent of this murder plot and who was involved in it and how it transpired. And the more I did research into these, I was granted access, accidentally granted, to be frank. If they knew what was in these archives, they wouldn't have never given it to me, because these archives held trial transcripts, tens of thousands of pages, all right, of internal New Vrindavan documents and publications and investigative reports and trial transcripts and Bhaktipad's correspondence, hundreds and hundreds of letters. But anyway, so this was given to me because I was writing a history of New Vrindavan, and there it was. And it took me 10 years to read through these tens of thousands of pages. And what I discovered in them regarding the plot to murder Steve Bryant, I was completely shocked. These people that I knew, that I was even friends with, that were my superiors, the higher ranking people at New Vrindavan, reading these documents which implicate them in this murder conspiracy was like a revelation to me. And I pretty much decided that, Krishna has given me these archives for a reason. And I saw it as my sacred duty to write this book, incorporating all this information and publishing it for the benefit of the world, and especially for my god brothers and god sisters in the Hare Krishna movement. And I discovered that the key factor which made this murder conspiracy possible, and also the murder of Charles St. Denis, but my book's about the murder of Steve Bryant, who had criticized Swami Bhaktipad, all right? So the point that I felt that allowed this to happen, indeed it even forced this murder to happen, was something I call deranged devotion. And that is that charismatic bond where the follower attributes divine and supernatural powers to the charismatic leader. And because of the leader's supernatural powers, alleged supernatural powers that they attribute to the leader, that they lose all their sense of rational self and become obedient servants to this leader. And whatever this leader wants becomes the supreme law to these people. And I call that deranged devotion because, it's twisted. It's really twisted. And nearly all of these people, by the way, who were involved in the murder conspiracy, recognized this later, all right? And then they knew that they were in big SHIT because they had given their lives and followed orders to protect this man who they thought was God's gift to the world, but was actually a cheater. So that's my main purpose in writing this, is to warn others of the danger of deranged devotion and charismatic relationships, and to keep a person to just keep their intelligence. Don't give up your intelligence. I did for 10 or so, 12 or 13 years. And then gradually, maybe due to things that I had seen, my intelligence began questioning. So that's why I wrote this book, to help avoid this from happening in the future.
Henry Doktorski, thank you for consulting on this series, and thank you for talking to me today.
Hey, my pleasure, Lindsay.
That was my conversation with Henry Doktorski. If you want to learn more about the Hare Krishna murders, check out his book, Healing for Krishna, The Danger of Deranged Devotion. Next week on American Scandal, the story of Michael Avenatti, the lawyer who chased scandal and then found himself embroiled in his own. From Wondery, this is American Scandal. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, subscribe now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Wondery.com, or wherever you're listening to this right now. If you're listening on a smartphone, tap or swipe over the cover art of this podcast. You'll find the episode notes, including some details you may have missed. You'll also find some offers from our sponsors. By supporting them, you help us offer this show to you for free. And if you do like this show, we'd love you to give us a 5-star rating and leave a review. I always love to know your thoughts, and reviews are the best way for others to find the show. Tell your friends and family and show them how to subscribe. You can also find us and me on Twitter. Search for #American Scandal or follow me at Lindsay A. Graham. American Scandal is hosted, edited, and executive produced by me, Lindsey Graham, for Airship. This episode was produced by Katie Long. The Hare Krishna series was written by Steve Chivers, editing by Andrew Stelzer. Executive producers are Stephanie Jens, Marsha Louie, and Hernan Lopez for Wondery.